A baby is being born. It's 30,000 BC. There's no hospital. There's no anesthesiologist standing by with a reassuring voice and a very expensive IV drip. There's no sterile room, no beeping monitors, no one handing out ice chips and telling you to breathe. There's just a woman, the people around her, a fire somewhere nearby, and a situation that absolutely cannot wait. And somehow, across hundreds of thousands of years in every corner of this planet, our ancestors figured it out. Not once, not by accident. Over and over again, in jungles and tundras and river deltas and mountain caves, humans figured out how to bring a new human into the world. So what did that actually look like? What did ancient people do the moment a baby arrived? The answer is stranger, more sophisticated, and more moving than most people ever think to ask about. Let's start with the birth itself, because the first thing you have to understand is that ancient birth was not the chaotic, improvised guesswork that people often imagine. There's this assumption baked into how we talk about prehistory that ancient humans were basically stumbling through everything. They weren't. By the time Homo sapiens were anatomically modern, somewhere around 300,000 years ago, they had already been watching births happen for generations. They had accumulated knowledge. They had preferences, methods, positions, and almost certainly specialists. The idea of a midwife, a person whose specific role was to assist in birth, appears to be very, very old. Anthropologists studying forager societies that survived into the modern period consistently find the same thing. Birth is not a solo event. It's communal, managed, and guided. Here's what the physical evidence tells us. Skeletal remains from ancient burial sites show something that researchers found genuinely surprising when they first started noticing it. Neanderthal women, our close cousins who lived across Europe and Western Asia, until roughly 40,000 years ago, had infants with heads proportionally large enough that unassisted birth would have been extremely difficult. Paleoanthropologist Karen Rosenberg has argued that this skeletal reality is itself evidence of assisted birth, that the geometry of the Neanderthal pelvis and infant skull essentially required another set of hands. Think about what that means. Assisted childbirth may predate our own species entirely. It may not be a human invention at all. It may be an inheritance. Now, the moment the baby actually arrived, one of the first and most universal things that seems to have happened across ancient cultures is an assessment. Does this child live? Because here's the part of ancient birth that is genuinely hard to sit with. Infant mortality in prehistoric populations was catastrophic by modern standards. Estimates vary, but something in the range of 30 to 50% of children born in pre-agricultural societies did not survive their first year. That number shapes everything. It shapes how communities responded to a birth, how long they waited before naming a child, how they understood the boundary between potential life and actual life. Babies were precious. They were also fragile in a way that ancient people understood with a clarity we've largely been insulated from. In many ancient and indigenous cultures, newborns went through a set of immediate physical rituals that served very practical purposes. The cutting of the umbilical cord, for instance, was not casual. Archaeological and anthropological records show that across cultures, the cord was cut with specific tools, at specific times, and often tied with materials chosen deliberately. In some societies, the stub of the cord was dried and kept as a protective object or placed in a symbolic location. The placenta was almost never simply discarded. Across an extraordinary range of cultures, from ancient Egypt to pre-Columbian Mesoamerica to communities across sub-Saharan Africa and indigenous Australia, the placenta was treated as significant. Buried, sometimes under the threshold of the home, sometimes near a tree, sometimes in a location tied to the family's identity. It was the baby's companion, its twin, its first home. Let's talk about what happened to the newborn's body in those first hours. Cold was an immediate threat. Fire was essential. In nearly every ancient birth context we have evidence for, warmth was the first priority. The infant was placed near heat, wrapped in animal skin or plant fiber, held against a body, skin-to-skin contact, which modern medicine now enthusiastically promotes for premature infants under the name kangaroo care, was the default. It wasn't a protocol. It was just the obvious thing to do when you have a small creature that cannot regulate its own temperature, and you live before central heating existed in any form. The body of the mother, or another warm adult, was the incubator. Water was also nearly universal in the first rituals. Washing the newborn appears across ancient cultures with remarkable consistency. The ancient Egyptians washed newborns and anointed them. Mesopotamian birth records reference ritual cleansing. Greek and Roman traditions included washing as the opening act of welcoming a child into the world. Among many African and indigenous American traditions, water rituals at birth were tied to identity, protection, and